Meet Samuel Johnson, a paradigmatic figure of English 18th century letters. Active in the middle part of the century, he dominates English publication and consideration of literature for the generations that follow on account of his dictionary. Let's talk about Johnson a little bit and get to know the man and his legacy. Johnson was born above a bookshop, his father's, and no more metaphorical significance could be given for his life looming above the books and living among them. His family fell into poverty, and he actually could not even continue or complete his Oxford education on account of financial troubles. He took up teaching, moved to London from Lichfield, where he grew up, and found work as an occasional essayist and writer in a series of publications until the 1740s, when he was approached by a consortium of local London publishers who sought him out to be the key man writing the first official dictionary in the English language. Till that point, no English dictionary had existed to standardize and, as Johnson himself called it, to fix the language. It was thought that the language was undergoing such rapid transformation on account of the commerce, on account of the growing literacy, and on account of the many international relations that Britain was flourishing under in those years, that just as Chaucer was effectively in a foreign language, Middle English compared to the English, High English, modern English, so too would Dryden eventually seem to be completely in a foreign tongue. And so, in the 1740s, Samuel Johnson was hired to undertake this massive project of serving as the official lexicographer of English. And so in the 1740s, Samuel Johnson was engaged by this group of London booksellers and publishers to assemble and write the first major English dictionary. He thought it would take 3 years. That might have been a towering hubris, considering that a team of scores of scholars in France had written one over many, many years, the Academy, as well as in Italy, something similar occurred. It didn't take, however, all that long, for after 9 years, Johnson, working only with a team of 6 assistants, published a massive dictionary. Johnson's most active years as both a poet and essayist. He was publishing during this time another newspaper similar to what Addison had done at the beginning of the century. Johnson's was called The Rambler, and in it he offered prescriptive analysis of what fiction ought to do, what biography, and what various moods ought to seem like. Why are we talking about Johnson? Not only is the dictionary itself a towering achievement, and still to this day extremely influential on dictionaries that are still almost 300 years later still being written with its system of language, its examples. It is a repository, it's a compendium of hundreds of thousands of examples, as well as the usage, but also because he stands as someone who sought to establish how to use speech, how to act, how to use the culture and property of the mind in order to become a more thinking person, in order to become more clear, and in order to translate one's own personal experience into something instructive for others. That typology of trying and seeking and achieving a kind of appropriate or correct use of the mind through language makes Johnson in many ways the archetypal 18th century figure. Someone who sought a kind of polite, proper, correct, thoughtful, and, above all, precise use of the mind. He therefore brings together so many of those Enlightenment values, tries to establish or systematize speech in English, and through his writing continues to be a symbol of education, someone who teaches others, affords that example to others. Let's call him Dr. Johnson as he came to be known. Dr. Johnson's reflections on fiction, biography, and the biography made of his life. Johnson writes about fiction as being not just an idle pursuit, but an instructive one, a dichotomy we'll dwell on, all still in our final weeks. Fiction is not just meant to represent, to be a mirror of human experience, and you can see some of his writings on the matter in an essay on fiction from The Rambler. But he also was insistent that although it needed to reflect reality, writing should serve as a field of uplift, a kind of didactic, instructive examples for the masses. This is even more poignant considering that Johnson himself was not only the progenitor, the writer of a new class of writing with his dictionary, but he also is the subject of another class of important writing, the first major English language biography. Johnson not only wrote about biography, his life was turned into a massive and meticulous biography by a man, another writer, one generation younger, named Boswell. Boswell met Johnson after Johnson had already published the English language dictionary, Johnson's dictionary. When Johnson was in his early mid-50s, Boswell was a young 20-something, and they enjoyed a 30-year friendship for the duration of Johnson's life and the years that it took Boswell to take copious, journaled, close notes on Johnson, the subject of his biography. Johnson knew that Boswell was writing a biography about him, and a biography that came out 10 years after Johnson died. Boswell's The Life of Johnson is a landmark text in how to take not only the monumental moments, but also the private, mundane, minute moments and turn them into a reflection of an individual. It includes many of Johnson's warts. He's a man who suffered from some mental distress, depression, OCD, Tourette syndrome. It tries to understand its subject, and it over and over again inserts Boswell into the description, into the narrative. And so how this kind of partnership between language and experience, between these two figures, Johnson and Boswell, is fascinating to look at, to see how Johnson, this figure, who was all about trying to turn experience into a precise, clear, and demonstrable didactic lesson for others, and one of wit, is the key figure in trying to understand so much of 18th century literature, what it must have been like to be a part of a generation seeking to act in a more polite, a more acceptable, a more sociable, a more correct way, while nonetheless remaining true to one's own experience, to one's own life, and to the society in which one lived.